Yeah, so the warmest of welcomes to our talk titled Building Inclusive Agile Teams, Ending the Pain of Periods. We are really hopeful that in the next 45 minutes, we're going to be able to shed some light on the working world and our Agile teams in the way that potentially hasn't been done before. But just to kick us off and to reiterate, I'm Maddie.
I'm Marion, and we're both part of the Agile team at Control Plane. And yeah, thank you so much for coming along today. We really wanted to do this talk because we both recognise the impacts that periods had on our own working lives, and we, despite working together for quite a few months, had never even mentioned it to each other. And since doing so, it's really brought us a lot of benefits, so we wanted to take this topic a bit further and spread it wider with more people. But yeah, we recognise that it's still quite a stigmatised topic, particularly in the workplace and within the tech industry. So wanted to do a quick check-in with people in the room, how people feel at the minute about the topic of menstruation and menopause. So we have, how awkward do you feel right now? We have some GIFs to represent some feelings. So in a show of hands, who resonates most with Kevin dropping the ice cream? Kind of maybe wish you weren't here, maybe come to the wrong talk. Okay, that's great. Shrek feeling a little bit pensive on the topic. Awesome. Cool. And someone from Shaun the Sheep who's feeling great and ready to go.
Oh, amazing.
Okay, awesome.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, however you're feeling, yeah, it's really, really nice that we have, both people who are super supportive and feel really comfortable. And yeah, thank you so much for coming. If you're here to learn a little bit more about it and don't feel totally comfortable right now, that's what this is all about. There is no judgment at all. And just to show you are very much not alone, from a survey that we sent out, we found that 65% of people feel uncomfortable mentioning periods at work. And to give an idea of how normal it is, 10.8 million of the UK workforce menstruate every single month. And also from our survey, we found that 98% of those who menstruate say that periods have some impact on their work life.
And given that today we're at Agile on the beach, and we're all potentially part of the Agile space or maybe kind of adjacent to it, we were particularly interested in the experiences of people in our industry. So when we sent out our survey, we kind of explored what really our industry looked like. And one thing really surprised us, which was when we asked people about their comfort level mentioning periods at work, if someone was part of an Agile team or company, their comfort level actually decreased relative to non-Agile teams. So more specifically, on a scale of 1 to 10, where 1 is not at all comfortable and 10 is totally comfortable, as normal as mentioning a headache, those in non-Agile teams reported an average comfort level of 5 out of 10. So neither particularly uncomfortable, but neither particularly comfortable either. Whereas those people in Agile teams and companies actually reported an average level of 3.5 out of 10, erring much towards the kind of level of discomfort. And for us, this really validated the problem that it's valuable talking about these kind of topics in the Agile space. But not only that, we're super hopeful that not only our Agile teams can kind of get parity with other industries, but actually we can eventually become workplace leading in this kind of intersection of inclusivity and great teamwork. And the reason that we are so hopeful is that we already have the kind of permission and the foundations to do better. So we're already in a space that kind of has this intentionality of moving away from traditional management structures and towards more sustainable, human-centric ways of working. And one of the key principles that kind of drives this is the principle of continuous improvement. And one way that we can continuously improve is to remove impediments. And sometimes we think of impediments as potentially kind of maybe technical, whether it's tech debt or maybe kind of quality considerations, or maybe it's more kind of process related and things are impeding the team there. But sometimes the impediments are actually ourselves, whether it's kind of lack of knowledge, awareness, or exposure to a given topic. But the good thing in that case is that when the impediments are kind of more to do with us, we actually have way more ability to kind of control and then remove and influence these kind of impediments. And then finally, the Scrum values, 2 of those really stuck out to us, namely courage and respect. These are exactly the things that we're going to need to have in order to have difficult but constructive conversations. So really our goal today is to remove some of these impediments, whether it's kind of stigma, awkwardness, barriers, when it comes to talking about and accommodating for menstrual health in our teams and companies. And just a little bit of a caveat before we get started, really our intention today is to normalize the topic. So what we mean by that is that we want people to genuinely feel that when they're in the working world and periods are impacting them in that space, they feel like they have the option of bringing that to their colleagues, managers, and team. And on the other hand, people feel kind of comfortable and well-educated enough to respond in a way that's appropriate. But what we're not trying to do is force people to disclose kind of personal information, whether either today or at work, that they do not want to. And we just wanted to kind of make that distinction before we kick in. So today we're going to go on a journey towards normalizing this type of conversation, and we're going to have to take a couple of steps in order to do so. So first, we're going to have to actually go back before we can go forward and look at the kind of scientific education that we should have been taught in school in order for us to all kind of have a foundational knowledge set to build on and kind of drive us forward. Then we're going to talk about our research. So what does the working world look like today, and what do people's experiences look like in non-Agile teams and Agile teams? And then kind of moving towards solutions, what do inclusive teams and companies really look like? What does individual advocacy mean? And then really as individuals, what are your takeaways that you're going to enact in your working worlds? So we're going to kick off.
Thank you. Yes, we're going to dip into what we should have been taught at school, because we think a lot of the stigma that we see today in the workplace stems from quite a poor education around menstruation and menopause at school. So my school offered one painfully awkward lesson on periods. I actually managed to find a clip from it. I thought it might be kind of easy to find on YouTube. I'm actually going to play 20 seconds from it now.
Jensen, what about dancing? Can you when you're menstruating?
Yes, you can, with moderation. In fact, you can do most of the things you usually do. You can bathe or shower as long as you use warm water. And you can wash your hair if you're sure to dry it quickly. And you can swim if you wait until after 2 or 3 days after the beginning of your period. And you can go to dances and picnics.
Yeah, I don't know if anyone else was wondering whether they could wash their hair. Yeah, no, it's total madness. I mean, I didn't go to school in 1958, which is where that video was actually from. That was played to me in 2009, and our science teacher said, oh, you know, it's a bit dated, but the science in there is still correct. So we kind of left with this view of, oh, it's a, you know, classroom of girls, only stuff girls should know about, no mention of any symptoms people experience, no mention of menopause, kind of a very, very limited and completely unrelatable set of education advice to today. And yeah, I'm also interested in the room, the kind of understanding you think you have of the science at the minute, because I've definitely went into my adult life a lot like this woman here. Does anyone else feel like they maybe resonate with this woman thinking about the science behind menstruation? Yeah, a few people. And anyone feel like the cat who has it all sorted?
One person.
Nice. Cool. I feel a little bit more like that now after doing a lot of my own education on it. So yeah, I wanted to dip into the science, and I think it's really important when you're trying to remove stigma is to understand a lot of the facts behind it, so it's less of a mythical thing that people kind of just hear about, but we don't know what's going on behind the scenes. So I'm going to start with some of the key players, and I'm keeping it relatively high level, and I've chosen to stick to the things that I think affect people's working lives the most. So first key player is prostaglandins, and this is a hormone-like chemical that causes muscles in the uterus to contract, and that causes the womb lining to shed, so basically causes period cramps, and the more prostaglandins someone has, the more severe cramps they will experience. And then next up we have estrogen, which is a little bit better known, I think, and this has a big influence on people's mood. So it influences serotonin in the body, the happiness hormone. So when you have more estrogen, when it rises, you're likely to feel a lot better, a lot more energy, a lot more confidence, and when it's lower, you will feel the opposite. And then finally, progesterone. This has an anti-anxiety effect. So when progesterone is high, you'll feel less anxious, and when it's low, you will feel more anxious. And then with that in mind, here is a graph of the phases. I'll very quickly go through them. So the period phase, the most well-known one due to its symptoms of bleeding and also experiencing period cramps. And interestingly, this phase has the least to do with hormones. As you can see, the hormone graph is actually fairly stable at this point. So I think quite a big misconception on people's mood during their periods is usually mostly due to the physical symptoms someone experiences. Then the follicular phase is the very best phase when estrogen rises, makes you feel a lot more energy, a lot more confident, a lot more happy. And then ovulation, where estrogen peaks and then drops. A lot of people report feeling quite a short-lived day of feeling a little bit emotional because of that quick drop in estrogen. Hopefully that is short-lived. And then progesterone takes over as the dominant hormone. And some people report feeling calmer in this phase. And the idea is, from the scientific point of view, is estrogen is low, so you feel slightly less energy, but you have high progesterone, so it's kind of protecting you from feeling any anxiety. And then finally into the premenstrual phase, where both estrogen and progesterone drop off a cliff. So that both can bring people's mood down and increase anxiety, and that's where you get mood swings, and PMS, premenstrual syndrome, happens in this phase, and also sometimes PMDD, which is premenstrual dysphoric disorder, and this is a much more severe version of PMS, where people can feel really, really serious depression, even to the point of feeling suicidal. So it can have really big impacts on someone's life and working life. And then just want to show how this might look in reality. Ooh, the clicker is not clicking. There you go. Cool. All right, month in the life. So this is based on myself. So here's me having a good time, going along, and then PMS will hit, and I become this version of Kermit the Frog. Find it a lot harder to speak out in meetings, I think. To just have to try a little bit harder to think when I want to maybe interrupt or bring something up. And this is me when I get an email asking me to do something. I can really react badly. If on that week, if I get at Marion, please can you look at this? I think, how dare you? And by being aware of that phase, I don't respond in that way. But that is how I feel. And then this is me with brain fog, just not having a clue, or just not being able to follow sometimes things that are going on. And then finally, a few days of feeling really emotional. The PMS hits me quite hard, actually. And then I do go back to feeling pretty happy again and high energy. So for me, it's actually all in that PMS phase, and I'm really lucky to not get very bad physical symptoms actually from my period. But that's just an example of how it can play out, and it's very, very different for lots of people. Oh yeah, and then that was just to basically highlight where these feelings come in. And then I do also want to go into menopause a little bit. So I actually hadn't heard of menopause until my adult life. It really wasn't mentioned at school at all. And then this is a quote that we got from the survey we sent out that I really resonated with. So I'm not going through menopause, but a previous team member struggled with symptoms. I realized as a woman I knew nothing about it. Really, really resonated here. And my last company did a menopause awareness week, which is really great. But yeah, it's kind of really crazy that we're not taught about it when, all female or people who identify, those who menstruate will go through this. And this is a graph of how the hormones change throughout perimenopause and menopause. So as you can see, there's really big fluctuations in estrogen and progesterone, causing a really severe form of PMS. And some of the symptoms people experience in this are fatigue, brain fog, hot flushes and night sweats, and low mood. It can have a really, really big impact on people's lives. A podcast that I listened to recently actually said it's really similar symptoms people get to actually being pregnant, but obviously there's no support around it, or very little support around it in the same way there would be. I just want to highlight also that there's a lot of research going into this at the minute, and there's a lot more podcasts and books and things coming out on it. And also from a podcast, on average, after going through menopause, people had reported feeling happier. So it's not kind of a total downwards spiral. There are good things. But yeah, also wanted to go into that, and I hope there'll be more talks in future and things around menopause, because I think that's a really under-researched area.
Yeah, and then just kind of building on the science, we also wanted to share some of the key menstrual-related conditions that can impact those who menstruate, so that maybe if a colleague or friend raises this, you have some level of awareness of what they're talking about. So the 4 conditions that we're going to go through are endometriosis, adenomyosis, PCOS, and fibroids. So endometriosis and adenomyosis both refer to conditions whereby the lining of the womb ends up kind of growing in other areas. So endometriosis can actually refer to this kind of tissue growing anywhere, such as the ovaries or the fallopian tubes, but adenomyosis specifically refers to a condition whereby that tissue ends up going into like the surrounding wall of the womb. And then PCOS stands for polycystic ovarian syndrome. This is actually a hormonal condition. So in this case, androgens, which are a certain hormone, end up getting produced in an excess amount, which results in irregular ovulation and also potentially cysts in the ovaries. And then fibroids refers to a condition where there are benign lumps in or around the womb, and these can vary in kind of location and size, and therefore end up kind of impacting people via symptoms in different ways. So in terms of kind of the amount of the menstruating population that are impacted by these conditions, the first 3 impact are about 10%. But I would take these figures with a pinch of salt, because the World Health Organization says that with PCOS, for example, up to 70% of people worldwide with the condition are still kind of undiagnosed. And then fibroids is the most common. This 50% figure actually reflects kind of people around the age of 50, because as estrogen increases, you become more likely to get this condition, and therefore, the older you are, the increase in percentage of people who might have this. And then in terms of symptoms, a lot of them are kind of correlated with severe pain. So this can be back pain, stomach pain, as well as severe bleeding. PCOS has the kind of most unique conditions, given that it's a hormonal condition. So it can be kind of correlated with acne, hair growth, and excess weight. And that kind of brings us to the end of the science.
Yeah, so that was a lot of the research we did externally with a number of resources to pull together our science part of this. But we also, as I mentioned before, we sent out a survey to do our own research into people who had experience of menstruation in the workplace, because we wanted to gather some of our own data on it. So this is just a quick rundown of the participants we got. So we managed to get over 200 participants from sending out as widely as we could within our networks on LinkedIn and social media. So that was really nice to get over 200. So 94% of our participants were Europe-based, 57% UK-based, 46% work in tech. Some of the other industries covered were education, healthcare, hospitality, charities. And 44% worked in Agile teams, and 13% faced additional societal challenges, such as being non-binary, a trans man, having ADHD, or some kind of disability.
Nice. So now we're going to dive into what exactly we found from our research. So one of the first things that we asked people was about the symptoms, i.e. kind of how does menstruation manifest for you and impact you? So the top 3 symptoms were pain, fatigue, and mood fluctuations. And then we also asked people which of these is the most severe, and 40% of people said pain. So kind of the takeaway here is that pain is both the most common and also the most severe when it comes to menstruation-related symptoms. So much so that 60% of people that we surveyed said that they'd had to take at least one day off in their career due to kind of period-related symptoms. And we just really wanted to kind of illustrate this in some of the participants' own words. So people spoke to us about being paralyzed with pain, debilitating pain, passing out from pain, and not being able to leave the house. In terms of the impact on them, other people spoke about having second-degree burns from trying to kind of manage symptoms, being in the office for multiple hours, on the toilet, trying to kind of breathe and kind of go through these symptoms in order to participate in meetings in the working world. Someone else, their lips would turn blue and be on the brink of fainting. And to be honest, we got tens on tens of these responses. And for me personally, this was really kind of difficult to read through, not only because it resonated so much. I personally also have adenomyosis and experience really severe pain, but also kind of knowing that for the most part, these are yet to be kind of open conversations. And as a result, a lot of people kind of experience these in silence, because ultimately this is something that's still hidden and still slightly taboo, and we're yet to kind of have accommodations and a working world where people can really bring these to their colleagues. And as a result, over 70% of people that we spoke to said that they would actually consider making up an excuse rather than mentioning periods at work. And then when we asked people what they'd prefer to say instead of kind of menstruation, they would mention anything from an upset, dodgy stomach to food poisoning, which kind of insinuates you'd probably prefer to suggest to your colleagues that you have diarrhea than you are menstruating. Bladder pain, I personally don't know what this is, but apparently it's probably a more feasible excuse. Flu, fever, headaches, cold, and insomnia. So this suggests that we're way more comfortable kind of masking these symptoms at the moment than explicitly mentioning periods at work. And ultimately, this creates a vicious cycle whereby we kind of have limited education and therefore stigma around menstruation, which, as we've seen, results in people making up excuses rather than mentioning periods. This compounds limited awareness of this issue and results in people feeling unseen and unheard, especially when you have more severe symptoms. And the final kind of piece of this circle here is that it's actually correlated with poor mental health. So one piece of research by a group called the Circle Health Group showed that those with PCOS, adenomyosis, and endometriosis, on average, 70% of those people also had a diagnosis of depression, showing a really strong correlation between severe menstrual-related symptoms and poor mental health. So when we look at kind of solving this issue, we need to not only think about it as kind of a physical manifestation and a physical issue, but also a mental health related issue too, and thinking about kind of fixing it holistically. But don't worry, it wasn't all doom and gloom when we looked at periods in the world of work. We also asked people what was working well, especially in Agile teams. So over 50% of those in Agile teams in companies reported that they had location flexibility, time flexibility, and access to free period products, which ultimately helped them with menstruation. And when we compared this to non-Agile teams, this was actually quite a significant increase across the board. However, on the other hand, when we asked people about whether they felt they had a supportive manager, only 1 in 5 people in Agile teams or companies said that they did, which was actually a decrease relative to non-Agile teams. So this suggests to us when we're looking at solving the problem, relatively speaking, in the Agile space, this is less a problem of kind of procedures and policies and more a people and cultural issue. And so we just wanted to quickly revisit the stat that we mentioned at the beginning, that people in Agile teams feel less comfortable mentioning periods, and kind of wanted to explore why that might be the case. So we looked a little bit deeper into our data, and we found that 82% of those who reported to work in Agile roles also worked in tech, which probably doesn't come as a surprise to many of us. And then what we know about the tech industry from anecdotal experience and also the data is that women are very much in the minority in that space. So specifically 22% of the tech workforce across Europe are women. And from that, we can infer that those who menstruate are very much in the minority. And when it comes to kind of forming cultures, it's often the case that if we aren't intentional, cultures are formed by the majority. So the norms, the experiences, and the things that they value are kind of often the things that the whole ends up kind of being exposed to, and those are the things that are normalized. So when we're trying to, I guess, create space whereby the experience of the minority is heard, we've got to be intentional about kind of creating rooms such as these, policies and cultures whereby people understand this experience and also know how to accommodate for it. So with that being said, we wanted to kind of now turn to the part of this where we look at actually what we can do. What does inclusive teams and companies look like? And we're going to go through that in 3 sections. So what does inclusive companies look like? What do inclusive teams look like? And individual advocacy.
Yes, we're going to start at a company level, and this is probably most relevant if you're in an exec or leadership and management role. So things that can be implemented at a company level. And we asked on our survey what was working well, but also what you'd like to see more of in companies. And the most voted for one was policies around menstrual leave communicated by leadership and management. Then that was followed by having training on menstrual awareness and allyship. If there's already, I guess, HR training on mental health, this is probably an area that could also be included in that, and also having varied sitting options in the office, beanbags and things like that can help with people experiencing bad cramps who would be more comfortable in other positions. And these are some of the options that organizations have for support. So some of them are free. So there's period positive, which has a set of standards for what it really means to be period positive and the way these can be implemented in your organizations. Then an example of a company that offers training and accreditations for menstrual and menopause awareness, and also free lunch and learn materials that can be just used by anyone within your organizations.
Nice. So now we're going to look at the team level, which is potentially where most of us might have the most influence. So the umbrella principle here is that to ensure continuous improvement extends to people. And for some of us, this might be a given. We might be really good at this. But actually, in our survey, we found that this isn't always the case. So one person said, "I don't think working in an Agile team has a positive impact or any impact on my experience of menstruation. The culture remains that things need to be done quickly, and I don't think the flexibility Agile offers really extends to much more flexibility for workers." So this suggests to us that maybe in this team in particular, and potentially other teams, the kind of feedback loop, the empirical kind of process control has kind of extended maybe to the product realm, the delivery realm, the users, the stakeholders, but hasn't yet come to the team level, whereby people really feel like the continuous improvement actually creates a working environment that's good for them. So we wanted to get a little bit more practical and talk about what it exactly might look like to start to create more inclusive Agile teams. So when we asked people in our survey what's maybe the one thing that an Agile team could do, a lot of people came back and spoke about velocity and capacity. So they spoke about the fact that it needs to kind of be able to fluctuate like a cycle, that people would appreciate the ability to reduce their capacity, to have less story points, and be more flexible in work amount. So our first suggestion is to really bake in a shared acknowledgement that energy levels aren't always linear. Because from these pieces of feedback, it very much suggests that Agile teams, or at least some Agile teams, are kind of inferring that expected energy levels are pretty linear. Whereas what we know from the science and probably our own personal experience is that energy levels are much more cyclical. And therefore, moving from practices that are premised on consistent velocity and towards practices such as probabilistic forecasting that allow for variability will probably be a really, really helpful move. Not only can this have like great impacts in the product space and for our stakeholders, but it also kind of allows, I think, a sense of greater humanity in our teams as well. And then our second suggestion is to normalize health-related conversations and practices in our teams. So what this might look like is that you might have a team kickoff, or maybe you have a new iteration of our team, and you might be kind of intentionally thinking about ways of working. And then we have some suggested questions here that maybe you could incorporate into that. So the first one is, how do we communicate with each other where people are feeling under the weather? What does it look like? Where do we speak about that? And how do we kind of ensure that that conversation is open? And then as a result, on the kind of flip side of that, how do we support each other as a team when that happens? How do we ensure cross-functionality, that we're still kind of progressing towards goals, but at the same time accommodating for people that might not be feeling their best selves? And then finally, how do we ensure that the way that we work also supports general health day to day? And example practices might be simple things such as status indications. So for me, as I mentioned, I get really bad pain, and as a result, I feel kind of very low in energy. And so I think that the best emoji that represents this is a low battery. So you'll sometimes find me with the status indication. You might want to choose something else depending on your kind of range of emojis available and what you decide as a team, whether that's kind of a hot water bottle or something else. But this can be a really good, very simple indication that someone is experiencing menstrual-related symptoms. And then also simple things such as gaps between meeting. This, I think, is often like a thing that is often talked about, but maybe overlooked. In our calendars, they get super busy. But ultimately, this allows people to have access to period products, to self-care, and allows them to have a sense of kind of self-care and well-being whilst kind of in the workplace. And then also, there are certain norms around like good teamwork. So often we say that kind of collaboration and cameras on and face-to-face communication is really where we're kind of trying to aim to. And whilst we totally agree with that, we would also like to ask, or at least suggest, that potentially there are situations where there might be exceptions for this. So people spoke to us about kind of wanting to maybe do a bit more focus work and individual work, and also not feeling well enough to have their cameras on. And if we allow for these exceptions in some circumstances, maybe in our team agreements, then it allows people to show up in the working world when they're not feeling 100%.
Thank you. Cool. And then, yeah, finally on to the individual level. So whether you're someone who menstruates or not, ways you can support yourself and other people. The first one is quite simply asking for support and being supportive. So yeah, I guess what I want to do is encourage people to speak up about it. I actually have had really overwhelmingly positive experiences mentioning having bad PMS symptoms and things like that in quite male-dominated meetings. I've kind of always found people are very kind of warm and supportive, and similarly delivered a similar talk to this to Control Plane, which is mainly male developers, and they responded really kindly, and everyone had a friend, a partner who experienced similar things, and actually people are very aware of it and are open to supporting, which is really good to hear. And also, if you do want to speak up, I would also encourage you to use actual terminology. So say periods, menstruation, menopause, PMS. I think saying the words really helps bring down the stigma. The more people are used to hearing the words, the less it brings that like ugh feeling. So yeah, that's a really, really good thing to do. And in being supportive, that's just listening to people's experiences. People experience things very differently, and being able to ask people what would support be to you, whether that's some people it might be rescheduling a meeting or taking over leading a meeting for someone. Just ask what support would be to someone. Then going a step further, so some people in our survey had said they'd started support groups within their companies. So on Slack, having a channel for people to chat about period or menopause symptoms, and also suggest ways that the company could improve support. So yeah, having a support group and then suggestions from there, actually raising them to leadership and management to try and get them implemented. And then onto cycle tracking. So from our survey, 67% of people said they used some kind of tracking app. I think it's a really, really great thing to do, and it's something that's really changed my life and allowed me to manage bad mood fluctuations a lot better. So yeah, the first benefit of it is allowing for mental preparation. So being able to set your own expectations on your productivity and energy levels allows you to be a lot kinder to yourself, so you're not expecting to hit exactly the same amount of workload as you might when you're feeling really good. And there was another cool thing I wanted to say on this point. I might have to come back to it. But yeah, anyway, allowing yourself, I know what it was. Allowing feelings to come and go without action. So as I said, when I'm feeling like an angry dinosaur, allowing myself to just feel that and recognize that I will not feel like that next week, and allowing that feeling to go without taking any action or damaging any relationships, because I actually do think before tracking for me, I probably could react quite badly in some situations where I would now completely leave it and come back to it. So yeah, I think it's a really, really good benefit to be able to be super aware of your emotions and the symptoms you experience. And also just allows for general calendar planning. So Maddie's already touched on planning your calendar. You might in advance want to book out deep work sections in your calendar, or breaks and things like that. And also just planning maybe when you want to be in the office and not, if you have the freedom to choose. Some of the drawbacks reported were the time and financial costs. I use the Garmin tracker app, which is also a sports app, but that one's free if you're interested. Having irregular cycles means the tracking apps don't work very well, and having security and data privacy concerns, that was quite a big one. And some research was done and did find most of the tracking apps did actually share data with third parties for marketing, developer experience, and research reasons. I think research reasons is actually good, but obviously would like names and things decoupled from that. But yeah, those are concerns that are out there, but don't panic, there are some good ones. Flow, one of the tracking apps, they released an anonymous mode, and this allowed people to decouple their name, email address, IP address from any data that they put within the app. Clue is Orca approved. So Orca is an organization that reviews healthcare apps. They actually review apps for the NHS, so anything that they have approved is also NHS approved, so will have accurate medical information within it. And another Orca approved one, which is specifically for menopause, is Balance. And this one has very good reviews, and I think one of the first apps out there that's specifically for menopause. So yeah, definitely some good ones out there, and really big advocate of tracking and understanding your cycle. And then finally is just continuing your education on the topic. I put Janice up here. This is Jessica Ennis's website. She also has an app. She's an ex-Olympian, if you didn't know her. And she is really into kind of tapping into her cycle to train in the best way possible. And what I like about the research on her website is for each of the phases, it kind of gives examples of activities that are likely to suit you in those phases, whether that's high intensity or low intensity endurance, or kind of short, sharp bursts with lots of breaks. I find anything that's recommended actually from a sports perspective can really be applied to actually activities you do at work. So yeah, and I use a lot of her stuff for the science section. And here's just some other resources that we've enjoyed listening to or reading or been recommended. So some good stuff there. And then just wanted to finish with continuing allyships. There's lots of campaigns and charities out there. And Bloody Good Period, which is a charity, they found that actually 24% of the UK menstruating population struggle to afford period products every month. So that there's, even within this country, there's a lot of work to be done. And #JustAPeriod is a government call to action led by Wellbeing of Women, and this really supports getting better education into schools. A lot of the stuff that we're kind of trying to advocate for today, and I think through that will also bring down the stigma in the workplace. And here's some of the other ones. And also, more globally, there's a lot of period poverty charities here. So in areas of the world where there's little or no access to period products, up to 20% of a school year is missed, which is obviously a huge impact on someone's education. So Days for Girls in particular, they work in these areas to improve education and also provide sustainable period products. And WaterAid does a lot of helping to build clean toilets so that those who menstruate can attend school all year round. So lots of good work going on out there. And then lots of stuff.
Yeah, so I appreciate we've gone through a lot, both from a science perspective, data perspective, and also recommendations. So we wanted to give a bit of an opportunity to digest this information. So the next thing we're going to do is to think about a takeaway. So our ask of you is to have a brief conversation with the person or people next to you and think about what is one thing that you might be doing differently in your workplace as a result of this talk. And don't worry, we're not kind of expecting you to have remembered everything we went through. So we've got a summary slide here of the different suggestions from a company, team, and individual level. And our ask here is really just to think about what is most applicable to your workspace, because all of us will be different, our experiences will be different, and there might be kind of one thing that resonates a little bit more than others. So please do take a couple of minutes, and then we will come back to close out. So just to check out, we wanted to see how everyone is feeling now. So raise of hands of anyone who's still feeling a little bit shocked, not sure why they came, and ready to leave. Okay, wow. Who's still kind of feeling a little bit kind of unsure, but like happy to be on the journey? Cool, nice, a couple of hands. And then anyone feeling good, raring to go? Amazing. Oh, what amazing feedback. I hope you're not lying, because I'm going to take that as a feel good success. So we just really, to wrap up, wanted to... Oh, this is not working anymore.
Oh,
cool. Extend our thanks to Agile on the Beach. So as we said at the beginning, this is ultimately quite a stigmatized topic. So when we put forward, this is a proposal, we don't always get the most positive feedback. So we're really grateful that we've been able to kind of have a platform here today to talk about something that we think is a really pertinent issue. And then we're both from a company called Control Plane. And as Marion said, they supported us in taking this topic from a lightning talk to a full conference session. And so we're really grateful for that. And then we've got a feedback form. We'd really, 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 really love to hear your thoughts, especially as this is something that is not often talked about on a conference agenda. We'd really love to hear what you thought about it. And then finally, if you just click next, thank you. We'd love to connect with you, talk more on LinkedIn, and continue the conversation. So if you'd like to connect with us, these are our QR codes. And yeah, we'd just like to extend our thanks again for coming today.